So guys, you finally twisted my arm. I got enough comments and DMs over the last week or so that I guess we're going to go ahead and make this video talking about Donut Media's high-low car series on the WRX. And, our main takeaway from that video is do not let those guys near a Subaru. So guys, today we're talking about Donut Media's high-low car series on the WRX that they just completed at the end of 2022. Now, for those of you that don't know what I'm talking about or haven't seen the series, I will leave a link in the description for the series for the finale video that was uploaded in December. But essentially, they have a series of videos where they take two identical cars, or as close to identical as you can get with older used cars, and they put high-dollar parts on one and low-dollar parts on the other, and then compare them and race them to see if it's really worth the extra money for the high-dollar parts or if you can get by on cheaper parts. So this time around, they went with the Subaru WRX, and they got two identical Hawkeyes with EJ255s and 5-speed manual transmissions, and the outcome was pretty bad, as if I recall correctly, they went through about 5 engines by the end of the video series and 1 transmission. And it was a free-for-all in the comment section on these videos and brought all these Subaru haters out en masse to comment on what a big pile of junk Subarus are and how they are unreliable and garbage. And Donut Media themselves did not do Subaru any favors in their video, as they were constantly throughout the series cracking jokes on how the engines are crap, how they're going to blow up, how the cars are unreliable, and just was, horrible to Subaru and the brand. So in this video, what we're going to do is look back at what happened, or what we know that happened via the videos, because we weren't there, we didn't see this stuff firsthand, we can only speculate and work off of what we've been shown. So starting off, they got the two cars, and they went and got a baseline at a racetrack. And at the very beginning, they blew up one of the engines. They had a rod knock.
Day one's going well.
High car's engine blew up.
Now, in the video, they did say that they bought the car and it had supposedly had an engine rebuild. Well, in the next video, when they go through tearing down the engine, talking about trying to find what failed, they mentioned that they rebuilt the engine.
So before we took this car to the track, we had the engine rebuilt so we could thrash on it without having to worry.
And so there's a little disconnect there, whether they bought it with supposedly already having a rebuilt engine or if they rebuilt the engine and then ran it. But either way, it only had, I believe, 200 or so miles, they claimed, on the rebuild, and they took it to a racetrack and thrashed it for a best lap time.
We rebuilt it, thrashed on it, and then in less than 200 miles, we had something to worry about.
You and I both know that you don't go out on a fresh engine and beat the hell out of it on a racetrack. They didn't do a proper break-in.
Now, one thing to remember is that when you rebuild your engine, there's a break-in period. We didn't do that process. We just took this rebuilt motor with less than 200 miles on it, and we just hammered on it.
And I think they even mentioned that they didn't break the engine in, and they go through several engines before at the very end they said that they went through proper break-in procedure on the last engines they built for the cars. But back to this first one, when they're tearing it down, we clearly see that it is a freshly rebuilt engine and that it is pretty much spick and span from, a fresh rebuild and assembly. There's no gunk, no buildup on the engine. Everything's nice and clean, new gaskets and seals. It's a fresh engine, we know that. So they went and ran it on the racetrack with the stock oil pan. Now, Subarus have always had an issue with their engine oiling systems on the EJ series engine. It is a common issue. Most people know it by now, and if you don't know it, Google it. These cars aren't new. They've been out for 20 years or so now. It's common knowledge. There's a wealth of information on the internet from forums and people that work on Subarus and modify Subarus that have identified these issues and documented them. So it's not like it was some mystery that you didn't realize. So one big issue with the factory Subaru oil pan is it's just a big open pan under here. There's no baffling in here to keep the oil directed towards the oil pickup. So when you go out on a racetrack and you're pulling lots of G's and turns and curves, the oil is going to be pushed one side or the other in the pan just due to the G-forces away from the oil pickup, and that can cause oil starvation issues, and drum roll please, it'll spin a rod bearing. You starve the bottom end and the entire engine of lubricating oil, and you're beating the hell out of it, you know, driving it hard on a racetrack. So no baffled oil pan, the factory oil pan, is a detriment to these cars and to these engines. Another big issue with these engines' oiling system is their factory oil pickup tubes. Now these pickup tubes are two pieces. They have a flange here, they have the meshed little circular spot for the actual pickup itself, and then they have the tube in the middle. Well, this tube is not welded here or here. For whatever reason, I don't know why Subaru did this, but they braze this pipe to this flange and they braze this pipe to the end of the pickup. They do not weld it. And with time and age and vibrations and heat cycles, these brazings will crack. And when they crack, they can suck air. And when you suck air into a pump, you can cavitate it. And then you are sucking air and not oil, and again, starve your engine of oil. So this was a first design pickup. It just hung down 2 bolts to the bottom of the oil pump in the pan. Later on, they added a stabilization brace that bolted to the windage tray underside of the block, but it still had the same issue with the brazes failing and cracking and sucking air. So another big detriment is this oil pickup. Again, both of these issues are heavily documented with Subaru performance and modification. That's why you get an upgraded oil pan with baffling and you get a fully welded oil pickup tube. So yes, no defense of Subaru here for those parts, but those parts work perfectly fine when you drive the car and use the car as a normal everyday car. When you take that car to a racetrack and beat on it, those parts aren't race parts, they're street parts, so of course you're going to have some issues. And even though they didn't talk about it in the video, they did mention the oil pan and the baffling quite a bit. Another issue with the oil system is the oil pump. These screws here on the back of the pump assembly can loosen up with age. This isn't a super common issue, but it does happen. More common of issue is the problem with the non-baffled oil pan, and then with the brazing on that oil pickup, but there is the issue with the factory oil pump screws sometimes backing out, and when they back out, again, the pump starts coming apart and sucking air, and you again starve the engine of oil and will spin a rod bearing. So yeah, Donut Media did trash that first engine for possibly 2 reasons. 1, they were beating the hell out of a freshly rebuilt engine, which is a no-no. And then 2, they were out there beating on the car with the factory non-baffled oil pan in there, pulling G's and sloshing the oil away from the pickup, starving the engine of oil. So there's where your first engine failed. So I'm trying to do all this by memory, so if I get some details a little backwards, please forgive me. I believe the second engine was they went out to the track and they wrecked the car. They didn't technically wreck it, but went into a turn, went sideways, car came up on 2 wheels really hard, hit a rumble strip, and broke the coilovers, broke the suspension, peeled the wheels over, screwed up the body of the car, and again they said that the engine was destroyed. I don't know if they actually said what happened to the engine or had a video clip of the engine running after the wreck, but they just said the engine was kaput.
The body's bent and the engine is somehow kaput.
Could have been the same issue. They were high RPM. They had the car up on 2 wheels. Again, tilting the car, oil would have gone away from the oil pickup again, starved the engine of oil. Boom, another blown up engine for racing a car with factory street parts on it. So from there, they went and bought a completely different WRX and transplanted the parts from the wrecked car onto the transplanted car. Now, with that transplanted car, there was a completely different engine in it, a completely new car we had no history on and we didn't know anything about. Now, in that video, they did show, if I recall correctly, again, I'm going by memory on this, and that's a long video and a lot of different steps. I think there was a baffled oil pan on that engine, but they did blow that engine up as well. And the reason for that is, well, we don't know. We don't know what the mileage was on it. We don't know the previous history of the car. We don't know the previous maintenance of the car. The car could have had a rod knock and possibly they filled the engine with Lucas or STP or, thick diesel oil. I've seen that done before where people will put really, really heavyweight oil in their engine to mask a rod knock to sell the car. So they probably bought it with a tore up engine on the third engine, even though it had some upgraded parts, aftermarket parts on it. So again, hard to blame Subaru for a 20-year-old car almost that has no maintenance knowledge, no mileage knowledge, and we don't know how abused it was before it got to them. So the fact that it blew up right off the boat for engine number 3 is, not really consequential. So quick recap, trying to build this back in my mind. The first car blew up right away after getting a baseline on the track after a fresh rebuild, so blew it up purposely, basically. The second engine blew up because the car high-sided on 2 tires and starved the engine oil. The third engine they blew up was the replacement high car after they wrecked it, and we didn't know the history of the engine, but it was down on power and didn't run well when they got it, so kaput. And then I think low car blew its engine again, but again, they were running it without the baffled oil pan running on the racetrack again. More oil starvation for number 4. And then I don't even remember if they did blow up 5 engines or if the other engine did blow up again, but at one point they finally did rebuild the engines, put the upgraded oil lubrication parts on it that needed the baffled oil pan, the good pickup, and they did say that they did an engine break-in procedure. Thankfully, finally, and I believe that was the end of their engine issues. Now, they did blow up one transmission, I believe it was high car again, at the finale when they were at Sonoma, and that's kind of surprising to me. I figured the transmissions would have blown up way beforehand because the 5-speed manual in the WRX is notoriously fragile as compared to the STI 6-speed because they are completely different animals, and that transmission was not meant to handle that kind of power load. The 5-speed manual in those WRXs was essentially the same transmission they were putting in the 100 and some odd horsepower Outbacks, Legacies, Foresters. It wasn't really meant for 200, 300, 400 plus horsepower on a souped up WRX. So I was surprised that they lasted as long as they did because, again, they're notorious for failure. So can't really say much about the 5-speed manual there as it's pretty much known to be a big old flop when it comes to performance. So the big issue here to start off with is that they all admit they have no real knowledge of Subarus, nor had they worked on Subarus before. They didn't know the proper modifications to do to get a Subaru ready to run it on a road course or racetrack, and they just kind of kept doing the wrong thing over and over again and not learning from the mistake is why they went through so many engines. Now, again, it paints Subaru in a bad light. The trolls eat it up, but most of us that actually know Subarus know that they are reliable cars when you treat them right and maintain them properly. At this point, I have probably owned close to 100 Subarus, and that's not an exaggeration. I've got 25 of them right now, and I have never had a Subaru engine blow up on me or a transmission blow up on me in the entire time I've owned all of these cars. Now, I've bought plenty of them with blown engines and blown transmissions and issues before and fixed them and sold them, or fixed them and drove them and then sold them, but I've never had a Subaru that I have been the one to have it fail with while I was driving it, while I was owning it, while I maintained it. It comes down to proper maintenance, proper modifications if you're gonna race it, and just having some common sense with this stuff. Some of the stuff they did, it's like, gee, why do you think it blew up? I don't know. You took a fresh engine that hadn't been broken in and beat the hell out of it on a racetrack. You took engines that have notorious oiling issues on racetracks in stock form and took them to the racetrack and wondered why they had oil issues. Like, guys, take a little bit of time, get on the Google machine, and look up the stuff There is a plethora of information on these cars, on these engines, modifying, racing them, tuning them, and making them reliable. A lot of this stuff I talked about in this video right here, where I ranted talking about the turbo engines and the modifications people do, and you know, the issues they fall into. So the last big thing with this is the whole high-low formula does not work on a Subaru. You can't just buy expensive parts and cheap parts and throw them at a Subaru and expect it to work. You have to put complementary modifications together. You have to get things that work together and supporting modifications and put them on. You can't just put a big turbo on it and put a cheap turbo on it. You can't just put, you know, this and that and mix and match. Now, they did say they did supporting mods, but they didn't really specify what the supporting mods were for when they upgraded the turbos and things like that. We don't know the tunes, who was tuning them, etc. Just so many variables. Again, the majority of the issues were the oil starvation due to the stock oil components that they finally learned their lesson on and basically alleviated their issues on. But again, those of you that watch me and love Subarus will know the truth anyway, and those that just dog on Subaru, hate Subaru, and comment trashing Subaru just aren't going to listen anyway, so it's really for naught. So that's one reason why I kind of didn't want to make the video to start with. Those of us that know, and those of us that don't know, just usually choose not to learn and would rather hate. So there it is. So guys, thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see you all in the next one.